Our top story for tonight, Calvin Ridley signs with the Tennessee Titans, but it's bigger than that. We're going to focus tonight's news item not just on Calvin Ridley signing with the Tennessee Titans for a 4-year, $92 million deal, $50 million guaranteed, but the bigger picture is the Tennessee Titans and how they are building around and supporting the strengths of and trying to hide the weaknesses of Will Levis. Will Levis is the central quarterback for the Tennessee Titans. There's not going to be any quarterback competition. It is all chips in for Will Levis. And so if we are buying low on a quarterback this offseason, if there is the chance of a quarterback being drafted outside the top 25 in your underdog fantasy drafts and in the pre-draft, in the big board, in the way too early draft streets, Will Levis has the mighty, mighty upside given the Calvin Ridley edition, DeAndre Hopkins, and more. We'll dive into Calvin Ridley, the Tennessee Titans, and everything right after this. Well, that's right. Just yesterday, we saw Calvin Ridley sign with the Tennessee Titans, moving from the Jacksonville Jaguars. So the Jaguars just owe a third-round pick to the Atlanta Falcons, stemming from the trade of the Falcons, of Calvin Ridley from the Falcons to the Jacksonville Jaguars at the trade deadline a year and a half ago. Now, Ridley last year finished as the wide receiver 18 in fantasy points, total fantasy points, and finished as the wide receiver 27 in fantasy points per game. And you're thinking that's not too bad. That was his worst season. Calvin Ridley had never finished worse than 26th. He was 26th back in his rookie year, 27th now in 2023, but his underdog ADPs outside the top 30. Calvin Ridley has never fallen that far. And so we're thinking to ourselves, well, what is he walking into? What kind of offense is he walking into? And first we have to think, well, Calvin Ridley's walking into a Tennessee Titans offense that in previous years were 30th in pass plays per game. That was 2023. But this is a new team. This is a new coaching staff. This is a new GM with new philosophy. Ray Carthon from previous, he had just joined on a couple years ago. He's going to run the team a different way. And that was signaled by twofold. One is the firing of Mike Vrabel. Mike Vrabel, between the tackles guy, linebacker, run the ball, establish it, right? That's how you're going to win games. You're going to control the clock. You're going to win with defense, like a couple big plays from the defense, and then your offense is going to explode. Have occasional big splash plays. That's not the offense that's going to be run here in 2024. Second, So it's not only that Mike Vrabel is being replaced and replaced by Brian Callahan, but the other part is that the Tennessee Titans did not re-sign Derrick Henry. Derrick Henry, who has had multiple seasons of over 300 carries. We know the big dog. We know his story. We know future Hall of Famer. Okay, Derrick Henry, absolutely crushing. And even last year when his efficiency measures dropped a little bit and his snap share dropped significantly with Tyjae Spears, Derrick Henry was the one who was still getting double-digit fantasy points pretty much every game. And while he didn't live up to second-round draft capital, like he didn't lose a lot of weeks for you. He didn't lose a lot of weeks for you. So what we're looking at is a complete shift of the Tennessee Titans from previous years. These are not the Titans of old. These are the Titans of new. And the Titans of new are going to be focused on speed. They're going to be focused on stretching the field. They're going to be focused on it. We're going to attack you from a lot of different ways. And that's why they went out and they not only signed Calvin Ridley, who we talked about a little bit earlier, but also they went out and signed Tony Pollard. Tony Pollard, one of the most explosive running backs before his fibula injury, his leg injury from a little over a year ago that cost him efficiency for the first 11 weeks. In fact, Tony Pollard was one of those players that completely underperformed last year given the opportunity. So we're looking at a guy who has previously been extremely successful. This is Tony Pollard, extremely successful with limited touches, right? 12, 13 carries max, and then getting some carries out of the some passes out of the backfield, catching it out of the backfield. That's what we want for the Titans. It would be great, but it's even more so because Tyjae Spears is also a breakaway run, explosive player, top notch yards created, yards after contact per attempt. Tyjae Spears, top PFF receiving grade. Like, this is a player who is dynamic, and as Carthon said in the combine interviews, Tyjae Spears is made of the right stuff. He is a guy they want to build around. So you've got Calvin Ridley, who can stretch the field. Ridley, 2 seasons of over 1,000 receiving yards. He's had 3 seasons of at least 8 touchdowns and finished no worse than wide receiver 27 any season. And he's being drafted outside the top 30. You also still have DeAndre Hopkins, right? And Hopkins, he is on the wrong side of the age cliff at 32. He's going to be 32 when the season starts. But Hopkins last year, still 1,000 receiving yards, 7 touchdowns, 1,900 air yards, wide receiver 29 in fantasy points per game. And this is a player, 29% target share, 28% target rate. Both of those were top 12 in the NFL. So still commanding a good amount of targets. Still number 2 in deep targets, and that's beautiful. We want deep targets for DeAndre Hopkins. You have to remember, Will Levis came into 2023 not with the starter job, right? There was a lot. He had notoriously fallen in the 2023 NFL draft, and Levis was not getting the summer buzz. He was not being played to start the season until Ryan Tannehill got injured. And so that means that Will Levis was not getting the reps. He was not getting starter reps. And that's got to cost a little bit on the chemistry. You know who your good players are. You know DeAndre Hopkins is going to be getting the ball. But the problem is chemistry. When you're getting the feel for those downfield passes, DeAndre Hopkins, number 2 in deep targets, number 2 in unrealized air yards, 18th still in yards per route run. There's still a lot of juice for DeAndre Hopkins left in the tank, even at 31 and a half years old. So I'm not worried about DeAndre Hopkins. So you have DeAndre Hopkins, you've got Calvin Ridley, you've got Treylon Burks, who has not done a lot, but would profile better as a power slot wide receiver. That's where he succeeded in college most of the time. And so for him to hopefully slot into that role would be very beneficial. So you've got Ridley and Hopkins on the outside. You've got Okonkwo at tight end. You've got Burks right in the slot. The Titans also re-signed Nick Westbrook-Ikhine. Fine. A nice little veteran piece, a good wide receiver 3/4 for a team. But we've got Tony Pollard. We've got Tyjae Spears, Calvin Ridley, DeAndre Hopkins. All of these pieces are coming together intentionally. The chips are in for Will Levis. And look, Will Levis was not great last year. Let's not put 2 bones about it. Like, he was not great. He did have the one massive game, which was really great, right? He had one huge game with 4 passing touchdowns, his first start against Atlanta, 26 fantasy points. It was beautiful. We loved it. Levis, though, maxed out at 25 rushing yards in a game. And there were 2 games where he had 0 rushing yards. No, one of those games was week 17, didn't play much. But Will Levis has pathway to quarterback 12. I mean, we saw what Sam Howell was able to do with a mediocre Washington Commanders team, right? Howell was able to hit some downfield plays and get some touchdowns. And we expect this Tennessee Titans team to be different. I mentioned earlier, Brian Callahan, formerly the offensive coordinator for the Cincinnati Bengals. We expect that Brian Callahan is going to get the Tennessee Titans from 30th in pass plays per game. Heck, if we get to 33, 34 pass plays per game, we're talking an extra, 70 passes for Will Levis. That's great for the fantasy value for Calvin Ridley, for Hopkins. Like, we're not as worried about that. So with the pace of play increasing, Calvin Ridley and DeAndre Hopkins can coexist at 1,000 yards receiving. And Will Levis, if he falls on the right side of touchdown variance, which if the offensive line is addressed in the draft, or if the Titans are able to address a couple more pieces in free agency, we're looking at a massive, massive shift. Look, we love it. We're here for this. The Titans are not to be slept on, and I think are. They're being slept on, and we want to be drafting Will Levis late, quarterback 27 right now in Underdog Fantasy. If there is a quarterback who is a pocket passer, who has a pathway to being a top 12 quarterback in fantasy in 2024, Will Levis has as good a shot, if not a better shot, than any of those quarterbacks outside the top 25 to get into the top 12. In fact, last year, Will Levis had a higher best ball value rating than Matthew Stafford, believe it or not. That was maybe how bad Stafford was, but Will Levis has shown some upside juice. And so we want to be in on drafting late Will Levis, given the shifts that we've seen this offseason. We've seen the coaching change. We've seen the addition of Ridley, the addition of Tony Pollard, and then there's still enough room for the Titans. They didn't give up a first-round pick. They can take an offensive lineman in the first round if they want, or they can trade down and get multiple assets. Whatever the case may be, we want to be in on Will Levis here in 2024, especially at quarterback 27 value. All right, I'm going to give you a moment to listen about our Dynasty Dominator app here at Player Profiler.
Now, I know many of you are looking for a secret weapon for your Dynasty League, and I have it. It's called the Dynasty Dominator app. You go to the App Store, go to Google Play. It's right there. It's $5 to download, and then every year it's $5 to load the next incoming class of rookies. You can add Superflex, add tight end premium. It's incredible because it allows you to look up players. It allows you to vote on whether a player is a buy, hold, or sell, and then see the market sentiment on that player. And you can compare their lifetime value rating from Player Profiler to their Dynasty ADP at the FFPC, all in the price lookup tool. And beyond that, we have a trade analyzer, so you'll never lose another Dynasty trade again. And in our settings, you can set this is a win now team, this is a rebuilding team, and then we let you compare players. Look at their metrics side by side, prospect metrics, NFL metrics. It's all there. It's $5 in the App Store. There's some add-ons for Superflex and to buy the upcoming rookie class. Every year, you're going to spend $5 on this thing, and it's going to be well worth it.
That's right. It is going to be well worth it. We are in the throes of Dynasty season. That's right. And we just finished talking about Will Levis and the Tennessee Titans, how people are like unsure how to handle this. I'll tell you how to handle it. You want to be drafting Tyjae Spears. You want to be drafting Tony Pollard. You want to be drafting late DeAndre Hopkins. I've seen Hopkins go in the 30s and 40s in the best ball drafts. You know, you take some Calvin Ridley, who's going outside the top 30 of wide receivers. Like, we're here for this. We want this to succeed. And Will Levis has the downfield will to connect on big plays. And he also has just the gall, the desire to make it happen. So we've got a lot of optimism about the Tennessee Titans. Now let's shift gears. I did focus a lot on Calvin Ridley and, that shift for the wide receivers. I also want to do a quick recap of the Carolina Panthers, another team that is trying to improve and find ways to improve. They just like the Tennessee Titans, they replaced their head coach. The Carolina Panthers instead of have Dave Canales, the quarterback whisperer who turned around Geno Smith and turned around Bryce Young, or turned around Baker Mayfield, and hopefully turns around Bryce Young, right? That's just the trajectory. If he can do that as the head coach. The Panthers needed a shift, though, at wide receiver. They had Adam Thielen, Terrace Marshall, DJ Chark, you name it. Jonathan Mingo, that just garbage at the wide receiver position. And instead, because none of these guys could get open, none of them can get open. The Panthers go out and they trade for Deontay Johnson in exchange for a cornerback that they were reportedly going to cut anyways. So they get Deontay Johnson from the Pittsburgh Steelers. And I love this for Bryce Young, right? Deontay Johnson is a player that's been wide receiver 36 each of the last 2 seasons. I think it's been this mediocre quarterback play plus his injuries have really held him back. And while the jury's still out whether Bryce Young is good or not, I'm not convinced that he's good, but I'm willing to take some shots on it. Deontay Johnson last year, 23.5% target share, 24.7% target rate. We like that. And we need someone to win on the outside. Someone to win on the outside for the Carolina Panthers because DJ Chark was not doing it and the rest of the wide receiver core was not doing it. Adam Thielen fell off the edge of the cliff halfway through the season. Deontay Johnson instead is one of those wide receivers that is able to get open. He's able to manage some cushion. And we always see that he's getting touchdowns, he's getting targets, and just historically looking at what he's commanded before 2023, where he suffered injuries, cost him a lot. In 2022, 147 targets, 2021, 169 targets, 2020, 144 targets. So a wide receiver who can win down the field, earn a lot of targets, I think is going to be a safety valve. This is almost going to be Justin Fields, DJ Moore 2.0. I think it's a little bit lower. I think that Bryce Young, DJ Moore isn't as good as Deontay Johnson, but I think that it's close enough of a comp. And we saw DJ Moore enter into some major spike weeks when he was the only guy. And he's clearly the best guy in the receiving core. So we'll see how the rest of the Panthers wide receiver core shakes out. Adam Thielen's still going to be there. And Jonathan Mingo was just drafted in the second round last year. So hopefully, the Panthers will continue to attack. But the problem is they don't have a first round pick. They traded that in the Bryce Young trade. So this was the move that they had to make. And I thought this was a great addition for the Panthers. They're able to get a wide receiver who can be a difference maker. This is, again, a wide receiver who's had every season but one at least 5 receiving touchdowns. He was wide receiver 8 in fantasy points per game. This is Deontay Johnson back in 2021. So we like this. I think this is good for Bryce Young, good for him in the NFL. And, it's good for George Pickens. George Pickens, I was already pegging for a breakout because, Pickens is a dog and dogs can only be held down so long. It's only a matter of time before the dog gets loose out of the collar, right? If anyone's owned a dog, but George Pickens ain't no regular dog. He is a bulldog. He is a Georgia Bulldog. In fact, he is unleashed. And this is a former second round pick, George Pickens, 6'3", 200 last year, a 22% target share and a 20.4% target rate. So he was almost the same target share as Deontay Johnson. Woo. Now you've got Russell Wilson able to throw George Pickens the ball. Maybe Tyler Boyd signs with the Steelers. That's a rumor right now. It's not confirmed, but there's been some rumblings about Tyler Boyd joining the Steelers. But right now it's just George Pickens and Calvin Austin? Well, maybe. So there's room for the Steelers to address the wide receiver position in the draft. I wouldn't be surprised if they take a round 3 wide receiver to support George Pickens, but also they got rid of Allen Robinson. They know he's trash. And so this is an opportunity, I think, for them to be aggressive in trying to fill out those skill position players for whether Russ returns to Pittsburgh in 2025 or not. Right. The reality is maybe the Steelers finally have a bad season, like below 500, and get a top pick and get access to the quarterbacks for 2025 for the rookies. That's possible. But that's why you want to be building, like getting your pieces together now so that you've got a nasty, nasty team when the right quarterback does come around, i.e. the Atlanta Falcons. And that allows us to pivot to a trade that happened today. The Atlanta Falcons traded Desmond Ridder, their former backup quarterback, former, I guess, their former quarterback, for Rondell Moore. That's right, the Arizona wide receiver who was also a former second round pick, right? He was out of Purdue, 5'7", 181. His best comp on Player Profiler, if you go to playerprofiler.com, you'll look up Rondell Moore and you'll see that he is the Ant-Man, 5'7", 181. So Rondell Moore last year, 62 targets, 40 receptions. He had a touchdown. Really disappointing overall on the season, only 11.5% target share. So I think a fresh start in Atlanta with gunslinger Kirk Cousins. You got Drake London, you got Kyle Pitts, you've got Darnell Mooney, and now you've got Rondell Moore. Yeah, you are 3 deep at wide receiver, and you got Kyle Pitts and Bijan Robinson. That's what we're talking about, building like a juggernaut of an offense. We like the Atlanta Falcons with all of these different weapons. And pro-style offense Zach Robinson's going to bring in. It's going to be very exciting to draft a lot of these Atlanta Falcons very late. And Rondell Moore, like wide receiver 90. Actually, that was Darnell Mooney. Darnell Mooney, wide receiver 90 in ADP on Underdog Fantasy. So, who stands to benefit the most in Arizona? Well, if Rondell Moore's 11.5% target share is gone, there's been a natural replacement, and he's a player who's also 5'7", but even tinier. Greg Dortch, wide receiver for the Arizona Cardinals, 41 targets, 24 receptions last season. In 2022, 52 receptions on 64 targets, and that was mostly with Kyler Murray. But we've seen spike weeks from Greg Dortch. So just last year, we saw a 6 for 76. We saw a 3 for 27 and a touchdown on 100 air yards. We saw 2 for 45 and a touchdown. We saw 7 for 82. And then even in 2022, this is Greg Dortch, right? Just absolutely stepping in when needed, right? So week 1, Greg Dortch, 7 for 63. Week 2, this is 2022, Greg Dortch, 4 for 55, 9 for 80. Later on in the season, 9 for 103, 10 for 98, right? 4 for 15, but 97 air yards. Greg Dortch plus Kyler Murray, that looks so good. So you've got Dortch, who has previous production. I think he's a very interesting late round draft selection. I think the Arizona Cardinals are in for drafting a Marvin Harrison Jr., Malik Neighbors type with one of those with a top pick. And then you also have this, I think, cements Trey McBride. I think this confirms the middle of the field will belong to Trey McBride. So I think we, and I in particular, need to move up. We need to move up Trey McBride in our rankings. So we're here for Greg Dortch. We're here for Rondell Moore. We're here for Deontay Johnson and Calvin Ridley. A few other wide receivers that I want to talk about before I call it for tonight. Curtis Samuel just signed a 3-year deal with the Buffalo Bills. And there's a wide receiver too. That is very interesting to me. Like, if there was ever hype about, Gabe Davis, Curtis Samuel has the draft capital to his name. He has the speed. Curtis Samuel, a former second round pick, 208 out of Ohio State. He's not even 28 years old yet. 5'11", 196, runs a 4.31. This is a player who receives the ball, but also can run the ball. And we've seen 4 different times so far in Curtis Samuel's career. Remember, Curtis Samuel isn't even 28. And he's done this at least 4 times, at least 90 targets in those seasons. Now, he missed most of 2021. He missed most of 2017. He missed some of 2018. But still, I think for a player who's been, back end wide receiver for most of his career, for Curtis Samuel to be signed for the Buffalo Bills, he immediately leapfrogs from wherever he is to, I would say, a top 50 wide receiver, top 55 wide receiver. So if we're expecting 90 targets, which is possible, probable, historically supported, Curtis Samuel plus the rushing, right? Curtis Samuel right now, wide receiver 75 on Underdog Fantasy. 75! Wide receiver 75. What? Unless Curtis Samuel gets injured, which is, within the range of outcomes, because Curtis Samuel, But Samuel has only missed 1 game in the last 2 seasons. Lots of love for Curtis Samuel. We need to be drafting lots and lots and lots of Curtis Samuel. He's tied to the most fantasy relevant quarterback in the NFL, the quarterback 1 in terms of fantasy points each of the last however many seasons. We want to be in on Curtis Samuel. Yeah. He's going to be a top 40 wide receiver with Josh Allen. Manufacture the touches. They're paying the money to him. He was a priority free agent. This is only day 3 of free agency, right? And we see Curtis Samuel already fitting really well with this offense. He can play on the outside, the inside, and the backfield. This is great. There's so many weapons. And I think that's another thing is the Buffalo Bills are looking to surround Josh Allen with more diverse weapons. Dalton Kincaid can play on the outside, the inside, the slot. James Cook can run between the tackles dynamically. He can also catch the ball out of the backfield. You've got Curtis Samuel who can line up any which way. Khalil Shakir can play all around the formation. I think the flexibility makes the Bills more dangerous on offense, and they can just hand the ball off to Curtis Samuel if they want. So I still expect Samuel to get his 16, 17, 18% target share. But I think that being tied to the Buffalo Bills now moves Curtis Samuel up into a top 50 wide receiver, if not almost in the wide receiver 40s. So I think that's where he needs to move, probably about 30 spots in terms of wide receiver. We want to be in on Curtis Samuel moving forward. All right. One last blurb is that we are hearing rumors. It's just rumors, but we are hearing rumors that Brandon Ayuk and the Jacksonville Jaguars are mutually interested in each other. Whether something happens remains to be seen, but we are now on Brandon Ayuk watch, whether the Jacksonville Jaguars are able to peel him away from the San Francisco 49ers after the Jaguars missed out on Calvin Ridley. I think, if anything, indicates that the Jaguars are not satisfied with their wide receiver 1 spot. And this is actually bad news for Christian Kirk. I was initially very happy about Calvin Ridley not signing with the Jacksonville Jaguars for Christian Kirk. But this immediate report coming out after that there's mutual interest between Ayuk and Jacksonville, whether for a trade to possibly get done, I think that's a red flag. So maybe we need to temper expectations for Christian Kirk until we get more clarity. All right, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. Make sure you guys are checking out playerprofiler.com/news and stay tuned. Make sure you guys are subscribing and hitting the like button, all that. Until next time, good luck in the fantasy streets.
From the Podfather to you, I deeply appreciate you tuning in. And many ask, what can I do? What can I do to help support the hosts, the research they do, the production costs? Go to PlayerProfiler.com, Dynasty Deluxe, World Famous Draft Kit, Rankings, DFS Dominator, and of course, Data Analysis. Subscribe to any one of those, and you support all of us and take Player Profiler to the moon.